As the meteor of time hurtles towards Oscar night, we are, in fact, rounding up a few stray ponies, movies we haven't seen on the nose. Our weekly cultural roundtable. This week we will talk about Drive My Car, a Japanese movie with overtones and undertones of Chekhov. I think that's fair enough to say. Also a Saab 1987 Turbo, which I believe is nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Also, we're going to talk about Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza, a look back to the San Fernando Valley in the 1970s, and the debut of two rather unusual movie stars. Both nominated for Best Picture. We will talk about both of them right after this news. Hello. You know, it's been a week since we talked about West Side Story on this show, and I still have, Steve Metcalf and I have this syndrome, I don't know what it's called, I think it's called Metcalf syndrome, where we can get like 2 to 4 bars of a song stuck in our heads, and they just won't go away. And so a week after our West Side Story show, I'm still like, I'm walking around the kitchen. I did it this morning, at least once. I'm sure the person I live with could tell me how many times I do this every day. But I'm in the kitchen, and it's the same thing every time too. I just look up for what I'm doing, and I sing, "Will they begin it? Will they begin it?" And then I fall silent, which is going to be fantastically irritating to the people who are not me, who have to listen to it. All right. Well, we're not talking about that movie this week. We're talking about two other movies, Drive My Car and Licorice Pizza. They are both nominated for Best Picture in the Academy Awards. They are either very, very different movies or very, very similar movies, and I think persuasive cases can and will be made for both points of view. And to make those persuasive cases, we have, as usual, a wonderful group of panelists. Tanisha Dugan is a director, producer, and arts consultant. James Hanley is co-founder of Cine Studio at Trinity College. Tracy Wu Fastenberg is development officer at Connecticut Children's. We are going to begin with Licorice Pizza. This is the 9th feature written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, PTA if you're a film nerd. And the most recent one was Phantom Thread, which could almost not be more different from Licorice Pizza. But this is a kind of Bildungsroman kind of piece. It's clearly Paul Thomas Anderson looking back at his own youth. He's about 50 years old when he made the movie. That's kind of the beginning of the period when directors and other kinds of auteurs start doing it, start making their amarcords. So let's hear a little clip before we get going on it. So the other thing I have to tell you, if you don't know this already, is that the movie stars Cooper Hoffman as 15-year-old Gary Cooper Hoffman, the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman, and truly 15 years old and looking it, and Alana Haim of the group by the same name as Alana. Neither one of these people really has any real film acting experience unless you count music videos, which for the group Haim, Paul Thomas Anderson actually has directed, I think, like all of them or something. Anyway, they play a 15-year-old named Gary Valentine and a 25-year-old named Alana. And here is a conversation between the two of them.
So, Alana, what are your plans?
I don't know.
What's your future look like?
I don't know.
How do you like working at Tiny Toes?
I hate working at Tiny Toes.
You should start your own business.
What business should I be in?
I don't know. What do you like?
I don't know.
You're an actress. You should be an actress.
So how'd you become such a hotshot actor?
I'm a showman. It's my calling.
Ugh.
I don't know how to do anything else. It's what I'm meant to do. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've been a song and dance man.
Come on. Ever since you were a kid. Song and dance man. Where are your parents?
My mom works for me.
Oh, of course she does.
Yes, she does,
That
in my
makes
public
sense.
relations company.
In your public relations company? Because you have that.
Yes.
And you're an actor.
Yes.
And you're a secret agent, too.
Well, no, I'm not a secret agent. That's funny.
And that's the beginning of a beautiful friendship, as they say, and maybe more. So, James, I'm going to have you get us going. There are some movies in which a producer and a writer and a company of actors and a director all kind of come together to make some kind of magic. This isn't really that, right? This really starts and ends with Paul Thomas Anderson, and he's kind of emphasized that almost by getting people with no particular film acting pedigree, although we'll get into the fact that like pretty much everybody in this movie is related to somebody with an impressive film acting pedigree, and of course Sean Penn and Christine Ebersole and Tom Waits and above all Bradley Cooper are in this movie too. But James, this is kind of PTA saying something about himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of like an insider movie about everything about his sort of strange relationship with the mainstream film industry, which is like he's very connected to the Hollywood main lines of filmmaking, but at the same time, he makes films that don't fit into that at all. And I think that it's kind of an internal exploration. And what is strange about it is that certainly from the trailer and its publicity, it's being sold as a film which is really like a quirky teenage film that would appeal to young people. But actually, I mean, I think it's a really intense and serious film in many ways. It has funny incidents in it, but there's a sort of incipient flying apart of the characters that is going on the whole time that doesn't feel like a comedy, and it doesn't feel like something that's reassuring in any way. I should preface that by saying I really like the film, but it's not what it seems to be. It's really interesting in terms of Paul Thomas Anderson and what he tries to explore, which is never right at the surface, never really clear. And then you go into it more and you start to explore the characters and you make the connection with his preoccupations. And then I think that it's kind of rewarding as a film in that way.
Yeah, there's a way in which Paul Thomas Anderson never travels the straight line that is the shortest distance between 2 points. He's not going. He doesn't have that in him. He's just the wavy lines all the way. And so, I'm sort of wondering also just how the rest of our panel feels. Tanisha, for me, I get to the end of this movie and I thought, I really enjoyed this movie, but I'm not sure on what basis. Kind of to James's point, like, is it a really funny movie? Not exactly, but it's funny. Is it a real penetrating movie? Yeah, kind of. But I don't even know how you feel about this movie, and I'm dying to know.
I think, James, you kind of nailed it, that it's very insidery. I think I was mostly delighted when I saw actors I recognized and was like, oh, well, look at that. Oh, look at Maya Rudolph. Oh, look at Sean Penn. And I think you're also right that it is a movie about nothing, but about something. I think if you are a PTA fan, I think this is a movie for you. I think if you're not a film buff, it sort of is like, cool. It's like, this is cool. The colors are cool. Maybe I would have liked to live in Southern California. There's nothing particularly offensive. Well, let me walk that back. It is middlingly offensive in the ways that, you assume the 1970s to be. But yeah, it's I think I'm wondering why this movie was nominated, other than the people making it, why it's being nominated for an Oscar.
Oh, well, that's a fair question. I don't really particularly have that problem. But Tracy, I mean, like, I'm fine with it being nominated for an Oscar. Tracy, there's, I thought of you watching this movie for one or two reasons, but there, everything that we've talked about so far, I think, emphasizes what could be a problem with the movie, which is that it's not funny enough to really qualify as a pure comedy. And then they kind of go out on certain limbs. And there's one that I'm guessing you might be kind of eager or dreading to talk about. And that is a character played by John Michael Higgins. He is the owner of a Japanese restaurant. He has a series of Japanese wives who apparently don't really exactly speak English, but he doesn't speak Japanese at all and addresses them in kind of this pidgin English. And it's, it's funny because he's an idiot, but to get away with that kind of funny, you really kind of have to be making a movie about funny idiots.
Funny?
Well, I don't know. Either it is or it isn't. But Tracy, I mean, there's a way in which to get away with it, you'd have to be making a movie about funny idiots, which I don't think this movie is.
No, it definitely felt like let's throw this in. And I'm not sure whether it was because, hey, let's sort of highlight, how racist it was back in the 70s and how it was okay to be that way. And look, we've come somewhat of a ways, but it felt like it didn't feel connected to anything else in the movie as far as theme or anything like that. And I sat there cringing, like I actually hugged a pillow going, really? They did this? And I mean, it's probably not uncommon at all from the 70s and 80s and 90s and, until very recently. But I didn't think it was particularly necessary. I don't think it added anything to the film, except to kind of be a bit of a throwaway. And like you said, it's not a comedy. So it couldn't even be used as an excuse that, we were adding something funny. It was something very cringy instead. Yeah,
if this were... Yeah, go ahead, sure.
No, I would say I totally agree with that, Tracy. I think that it's one of those things that I found I had exactly the same reaction. I sort of, really, what is this doing here? Especially in the context of when it appears in the film. It really is one of those things that, talking about insiders, that I can imagine insiders in Hollywood sort of making that scene and sort of dying to somehow throw it in somewhere because maybe somebody somewhere writing thought that was funny, but it just comes off as awkward. And I think the only context you could possibly have had that was in some sort of serious scene or serious film, another film perhaps, that really really went after this as being something that was a thing, and that this character suddenly pops up in the midst of this apparent comedy, and it sort of plays as though, should you think this is funny? It's awkward in my view.
Tracy,
I'm so glad, Colin, you brought it up, because that was where I would have gone in my opening salvo. and I was like, you know what? I'm going to walk it back because I don't want to start there. But it was such a turnoff. It made the rest of the movie really not for me. And I actually think that the case for it is about taste. And I think the case for it is about political correctness. And I think the case for it and the case for the movie is a kind of reassertion of a point of view and a perspective. And it made it tough for me to stay open to whatever it is that the filmmaker was attempting to offer to all of us, because so much of that particular scene, which happens very early in the movie, is a hat upon a hat upon a hat of offense. Right. And so they did it more than once. It wasn't even like, hey, let's put this in. It was like, hey, let's do it again. Yeah. And had they focused on the, Japanese cuisine in the 70s was new and avant-garde, as they're reading kind of the publicity flyer about it, that would have been fine. They didn't need to throw in the other part.
I don't think so. I would agree too. We should say that he's actually playing a real life person named Jerry Frick, who did open the Mikado Hotel and Restaurant. I don't know if he had the particular quirk that we see there. But so, Tracy, what I didn't do was sort of take your temperature on the movie itself. I think I have a sense what the thermometer reading is, but give it to us anyway.
I think I'm in the same camp as Tanisha, where it was like, it was fine. I don't really understand why it was nominated, because I didn't think it I don't think it's the same caliber as some of the other nominees. I didn't think it was funny, and I didn't realize it had actually been advertised or, touted as a comedy. And it seemed, it was a little meandering, a little frantic in some parts. And I actually didn't feel like we got to know the characters super well. I feel like we got to know Alana better, but the rest of them were pretty surface level. There wasn't a whole lot of evolution in them. And I mean, visually fun to watch, it's kind of a throwback. It's kind of fun. But I'm not sure I'd watch it again.
Well, I think, James, there's ways in which the movie, I don't like movies that evoke other movies that much. Although I thought the way that this one did was kind of interesting. I mean, you're sort of seeing the same San Fernando Valley that you see in Boogie Nights. There's at least one moment in this movie that is so intentionally evocative of American graffiti that it's almost impossible to miss, I would think. And there's a way in which I think the film does something that other movies do, which is kind of veer off into these little mini adventures. There's that little mini adventure with the Sean Penn character on the motorcycle out in the desert. There's another mini adventure that is complicated and involves the hilarious Bradley Cooper character of John Peters, the actual husband for a while of Barbara Streisand. And there's that kind of sense of, wow, you get home from that adventure and you're a little out of breath and you're really glad it didn't become more disastrous than it was. And I think the movie, to the extent that it has things that hook us, that's a little bit of it, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think the John Peters thing, actually, which seemed to be pretty close to how he was described by a lot of people, that was a sort of another movie in a way. It belonged in another kind of movie. It's sort of, I don't know, maybe Mel Brooks or something, it was an entertaining interlude, but was totally disconnected from the film. I mean, it didn't help the character development in any way. And I think it's kind of contributed to the impression I had too, which was that this was like a can full of episodes that had been building and sort of been put together in a script for a long time. And they were kind of ideas for a movie. And the only uniting factor, I think, is the character of Alana, who is really interesting and could go somewhere more than the film actually took it. But the film really feels like a meander through somebody's box of ideas. And it's certainly not as concentrated as PTA's Paul Thomas Anderson's other films. I think that sometimes there's an intellectual engagement that isn't present in this one. And it makes me think about what was he trying to do with it? I mean, it's funny in parts, but then it's tragic. And then it's like, really, what are you saying? And then it has the racist implications. And is that funny or not? And it's like a mess, really, I would say.
So we mentioned, before we go to that, I just want to get this clip out here because we just did mention Bradley Cooper as John Peters. Want you to hear a little bit of this. I mean, if there's anything that's really intensely fun about this movie, I think it is Cooper's performance. So here we go, A2.
See that Daytona Ferrari?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's mine. Gary, that's filled with gas. That's going to get me to the movies on time. Because I'm not a dead idiot. I'm John Peters. My only problem in life is that I love tail too much. I love it. I love it so much. I love it so much. Is that your sister?
No.
Is your girlfriend?
No.
I love it so much it's going to kill me one day. You know how much tail I get?
No.
All of it. It's all mine. You like Barbra Streisand?
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
Yeah.
I do too. Gets boring, but yeah. I'm gonna kill you and your family if you up my house. Okay? You got a cat?
No.
You got a dog?
No.
You got your brothers and sisters?
Brother.
Yeah, your brother? I'm gonna choke your brother out right in front of you. Okay, Steve's gonna look after you while I'm gone. It's a pleasure to meet you, Gary. I want you to be horrified. Okay. Your life's on the line.
All right. Tanisha, I think I might have stepped on your line as we were going to the clip. Do you remember what you were going to say?
No, I was going to ask James if he thought that, if there was some thread between the sort of disparate parts of this movie and like the way that this love relationship rolls. I mean, that was sort of the way I was able to sort of reconcile it all, was like, well, that's how relationships tend to grow in ways that are like unpredictable and weird and non-linear, and maybe that is what he's trying to help me sort of contain or consider.
I think that's what is a good point. I mean, I think that's actually what the movie could have been. And I think that actually both Alana and Cooper Hoffman are like, they have the potential to be interesting in that way, in that there's this sexual energy, but at the same time there's a clash of experience and not experience, and having in Hoffman's case, sort of having this life knowledge that is not backed up by an emotional maturity that really can engage with a character like Alana. And so it's a movie that could have had that potential, but it's in so many ways it fragments itself, and so it doesn't have that kind of feel of development of character.
Yeah, Tracy, I want to talk just a little bit about these leads, too. So, first of all, they're going to show this movie at orthodontist conventions just to say, look, there's no need for our services anymore. You can just have really crooked teeth and be a movie star. But, I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son looks a lot like him, but he also looks like a 15-year-old kid with really bad skin and funny-looking teeth. And Alana Haim is... I think the camera kind of wants to follow her around because she doesn't look like a conventional movie star, but she's really intriguing. I feel I want to see the quantitative analysis of this movie. I feel like I saw a lot of Hoffman close-ups and not that many Alana close-ups, but maybe I just think that because I wanted to see more of her, or maybe it's something the PTA and his crew did in the editing bay where they realized there would be something fun about us kind of wanting. There's something about her that it's very, very hard to quantify. But anyway, I just should let you talk. These are very unusual leads. That's all.
They are. And because I wouldn't say Alana is, conventionally beautiful, but there's something very striking about her, whether it's her mannerisms or something, and you feel somewhat attracted to her and the way she moves, the way she talks. Cooper Hoffman, yeah, he definitely fills that awkward, somewhat doughy, adorable, not quite a man yet, definitely feeling the hormonal changes of things. But the one thing we haven't talked about yet with the two of them is there is a 10-year age difference between the characters and the actors as well. And this is, she's 25, he's 15, 16 next month at one point. And it feels like it's never really addressed. It kind of is, in the fact that she's interested in world events and, figuring out what to do for her career, where he's 15 and, is always hustling. But those are romantic interests that's the thread through this movie. And she dates one of his friends. And so there's just sort of this, like, it doesn't really get addressed that there's this 25-year-old woman who is more than once attracted to a younger teenager, which nowadays would be, there might be some legal implications there. And I don't know whether it was a commentary like 70s was just a lot more open, or it was just thrown in there.
Tanisha, I wondered, I read it a slightly different way maybe, which is that, the Cooper Hoffman character, Gary Valentine, first of all, he reminds me so much of Max in Rushmore. They are both hustlers trying to act older than they really are. They are both lusting after inappropriately older women, but kind of acting as though they were kind of equals and peers of these women. But I don't know. It's maybe a 15-year-old guy kind of saying, what can I get? Can I open a waterbed business? Can I open a pinball business? Can I have sex with this woman who's 10 years older than I am, or at least get her to perform at least some kind of sexual act on me? There's one in particular that is discussed a little bit. But, it's sort of like that. What can I get? Where am I? And I don't know whether that's a specifically guy thing, but it is a guy thing, right? Guys are trying to figure out, what does my current state of maleness entitle me to?
I think that That may be true. I think you're onto something about, his kind of entrepreneurialism, his also being a part of the entertainment industry since he was a kid. And so there's a little bit of aging up that happens and maturity that happens in working inside of the entertainment business as a young person. I think, for me, Tracy, the kind of arbitrary age line means a lot less to me than where the human being is. And I think part of that shift is like, I have a neurodivergent child, right? My child is 5, but he is not 5, right? And I think we look at a character like Cooper, who is 15, and he's not quite 15. His experience suggests he is more in the world than another 15, right? One of my favorite Dave Chappelle, who may or may not be canceled at this point, I don't know.
No.
Sketches is, what is 15 really? And I would also say, we keep calling Alana's character, right? Her character's name is escaping me.
Alana.
But yes, that woman
same.
is 20.
Yeah, it's the same name. They're both, Alana is the actor and the character.
Why? But anyway, Alana is 25, but I don't think she's, as we learn, in relationship to her family, she's not as accomplished. She's not as mature. She's not as far along in her life. And so the arbitrary age gap means less to me looking at these two characters. And I think that's not just a 70s thing. I think that's, that's a real life, if we're actually dealing with humans on a human level thing, and not trying to establish a frame for everybody that works for all things all the time.
Well, I would agree if, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'd agree if it were like, 18 and 28 even, like, it just seems like 15 as a number to me seems so young. And I appreciate what you're saying. He is a mature and worldly 15-year-old. But that's just a hump that I had kind of a hard time with, where they didn't address it more. And especially if they were 25 and 35, wouldn't have thought twice about it. That's not quite the Harold and Maude situation, which is a lovely movie as well.
All right, we're going to have to wrap here just in order to be able to give Drive My Car its due. The movie's Licorice Pizza, very much in the continuum and a kind of aesthetic of Boogie Nights, and maybe a little bit of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And if you started to watch Winning Time, which is the HBO thing about the Lakers with Jerry Buss, also played by John C. Reilly, who's a perennial PTA actor, we're obviously digging up one particular chronological graveyard from about 69 to 79. I'm not sure why that is, but that might be another show. We're going to take a break. We'll come back.
Ghost crown the young child's fragile eggshell mind. Blood in the streets in the town of New Haven. Blood stains the roofs and the palm trees of Venice. Blood in my love in the terrible summer. Bloody red sun.
We are about to talk about Drive My Car, an adaptation of a short story by Haruki Murakami. It is written and directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who is nominated for Best Director. This is the first Japanese movie ever nominated for Best Picture in the Oscars, if you care about such things. It tells the story mainly of an actor, a 50-ish actor, who is dealing with 2 tragedies in his own life. I'm trying not to spoil too much here, but after those tragedies, after the more recent of those tragedies, he does wind up in Hiroshima to direct an unusual production of Uncle Vanya. He is assigned a driver, a young woman who is going to chauffeur him around in his beloved red Saab Turbo 900. It's a 1987. I believe it is up for Best Supporting Actor against Bradley Cooper. I don't know who will win, the car or John Peters. But yeah, and without much further ado, I mean, there's no way we can play clips from this because it's entirely in Japanese. Well, Tanisha, get us going. One thing that the other 3 of us were sort of commiserating about is it's hard, I think, to really fully participate in this film if you don't have some kind of clear relationship with Chekhov generally and probably specifically Uncle Vanya. And since you're the mega theater person here, you may be the one who has to help us out with this. But I just love your immediate reaction to the movie.
Well, I have to say, I think I may disappoint you because I don't necessarily think you need to have a love of Chekhov or a deep knowing of Uncle Vanya, but I do think you have to have an appreciation for actors and how they move and think through life, because you spend a lot of time in the room. And what we mean by that is like in the rehearsal room or in performance. You spend a fair amount of time in this movie sort of in the mechanics of acting. I mean, the director uses a technique for like working through text that made me think of, the classes that I'm teaching right now. It's very sort of like acting class, kind of formats in a lot of ways. But as I had said in my like data dump emails, I went through the canon of Chekhov, Seagull and Vanya, and, I barely remember the plots of each, because for us, it was about like, who are you working on and what does it tell you about yourself? Which I think is a really resonant thing when you hear, the director speak about why he won't play Vanya because it's too close, right? That is, I think, a true thing for Chekhov work. But I don't necessarily think if you are not if you're not theater literate and particularly deep into Chekhov, that you won't connect to this work. Because I surely didn't find my way in because I recalled the sort of analytics of either that play or any Chekhovian plays.
I said we didn't have a clip. The reality is that Jonathan McPants, being the person he is, dug 100 minutes into this movie and found during the Vanya rehearsals a moment where some of the characters actually are speaking English. So let's play that clip right now.
我只能跟你说抱歉，请原谅，得跟你说晚安。
分かってください。
ストップ。やってみてどう思う？ What do you think?
I think the director should be the one to judge.
Terrible. ひどい。
I agree with you. I feel like we both did better during the auditions.
Do you know why?
Because I've learned a little bit of the dialogue, so I use my partner like my acting cues. But if I don't learn the dialogue, I can't act.
Okay.
And I thought that this way I could pay more attention to other people's emotions. If I learned the dialogue perfectly, including theirs, I can react better.
I see. Why don't we read the book again?
So we should say this is linguistically, the film is quite a challenge in the sense that, yes, briefly there are some characters who speak English. There are a lot of characters who speak a lot of Japanese. There is at least one character who speaks Korean, maybe more. And there's one character who communicates almost entirely in sign language. So one of two Oscar nominees this year using sign language, the other one being Coda. So Tracy, give me, I will take your temperature. What does the thermometer say about this movie?
I actually really enjoyed it, despite its very long length. I did not realize when I started it at 10 o'clock at night one night that it was a 3-hour long movie, and I was not going to get through it in one fell swoop. And at first I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this and just enjoy it. I'm not going to enjoy it. 3-hour long movies are too much, but I actually really did. And I think one of the first things that struck me is that about 45 minutes into the movie, you get sort of the opening credits of it. And so it's almost like that first 45 minutes is sort of a prologue setting up things. It's very in-depth, and it gives you a lot of rich detail that informs the rest of the movie. But then to put in those credits at 45 minutes was, I think Jonathan McPants called it a baller move. So, which really I think it is. It's a little audacious. But I liked so many parts about it. I like that there wasn't a huge soundtrack to it. If you heard any music, there was a place in the scene where it was coming from, a record player, whatever. It made you able to focus on the characters. I liked the depth that we got from the characters, both Misaki and Yosuku, to be able to see them sort of grow and progress and their relationship progress together. And frankly, I loved the multilingual aspect to it. So one of the characters is the young woman we heard there speaking English. She's Taiwanese, so she speaks Mandarin. And then you had the Korean language, Korean sign language, and Japanese and English. And it was just, I felt that very aspect of it kept me paying attention even more.
Yeah, James, it's very much a movie about talking and communicating. There's a kind of a Bergman quality to a lot of the scenes where the characters talk into the middle distance as opposed to directly to each other. Some of that is accentuated by the relationship between a driver in the front seat and a passenger, a person being driven in the back seat. But it is very much, as Tracy's suggesting, a movie about how we talk and what we say when we talk.
Yeah, I think that's true, and actually, I think that's the reason for the direct connection to Chekhov and Uncle Vanya, where you can easily sort of go through a Chekhov play and feel that it's just sort of all talk and it's endless talk, and then at the end of the play, it's not really resolved. But in this case, it's kind of like a lever, the theatrical performance, the veracity of the theatrical performance by the individual actors is really based on finding their truth and being able to express themselves. And we mentioned the signing, the young woman signing. I thought she was actually maybe the most expressive character in the film, even not knowing sign language and having to rely on the subtitles. The precision with which she seemed to use signing and the expression on her face when she was doing it, it's like she was a catalyst for the other characters, at least two of the other characters, to begin to have more sort of sense of the significance of what this process was. And it appears to be the preparation of the play. And it's actually about the characters and their ability to get somewhere else, that out of their real lives, they were able to use the experience that was going on to actually grow personally. And I do sort of agree with this thing about the length, and the having the credits 40 minutes in is kind of like, it's kind of like a bold statement. I agree. It's like, okay, prepare to be here for a while. I think it could have been considerably shorter. But that said, I don't think I've seen a film in many years that really attempted to deal with the inner self that's locked away for one reason or another. And that was really satisfying. I mean, I do want to see this film again.
I think, Tanisha, the other thing we want to see, we wish we could see, is that production, right? At the end, we see the production of Vanya, and it just, and I don't want to spoil anything. We shouldn't spoil anything, but the final scene in Vanya there's such a huge payoff there involving the character who does use sign language. It's rare, I think, to have so much energy in a thing like this, building up towards a play within a movie or anything like that. And have it pay off so well. At least that's where I found myself going.
Oh, we're so like-minded. And when James was talking about the precision of the sign language, and then that final moment, I mean, it is so gorgeous. And, in this time, I guess it did kind of make me think of, as a theater maker, this time where you don't often see this, mesh of languages in a single movie, let alone play out in this play. In a lot of ways, I thought to myself, oh my God, there's no more perfect way for Vanya to end than in a kind of silence, right? That is so complete and full of his language, but quiet. It was really, really, really beautiful. I agree that I wouldn't have minded seeing the full production play out with Sonia.
Oh yeah, no, I'd be on the next plane to Hiroshima, particularly because they seem to have some kind of multimedia screen that drops down at the play that tells you all the stuff that you don't know, which I would absolutely need in a situation like that, some kind of electronic Rosetta Stone to help me with all the language stuff. Tracy, one of the other thoughts that I had is there are a lot of ways in which this movie could have, treaded too much across the terrain of obviousness. And I'll give you an example. There's a scene also near the end of the movie where one of the characters goes to her hometown and where something horrible has happened and where the thing that kind of shaped her life happens, and kind of walks down into an actual hole, into a crater. And then after a scene there, walks back up having sort of interrogated her past and herself and seems to be changed and transformed. And it's really the pivotal moment of the movie for those two characters. I don't know. That could have seemed like a pretty heavy-handed trope. And somehow or other doesn't. I'm not sure how the director pulls this off, but somehow or other we don't feel like we're being over-instructed at that moment.
And I think there's two things that come into play there. Nobody in the entire movie is overly emotional, right? A lot of it is, I don't want to say deadpan, but it's very even keeled, even in the emotional moments. It's sort of that quiet, understated. And even after the transformation happens, even though there's more emotion, you can feel that shift, you can feel that change very deeply. Even the way it's played out is not overly so. There's still this subtlety to it. And it's sort of almost like a silent understanding more. And I think that's where it succeeds in not falling into the trope or the obvious or what you expect to have happen, is because there is just that underlying, heaviness, but heaviness, then a little lightness, but still that heaviness is there. They understand that full transformation may not happen, right? And I think they even acknowledge that in the dialogue.
Right. Although there's this rather enigmatic ending where we wonder exactly how much transformation has happened.
Correct. That too.
It seems like maybe a lot. And certainly somebody got a much more expensive hair appointment than she had been getting prior to that. All right.
The car. Someone has to explain to me the coda. I really need James's.
Well, we can't say too much about it. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But
I do think you could explain that. My impression, certainly, of the car is that it represents enclosure. I won't say more than that, but enclosure about characters and ability to express beyond that. I mean, we talked about. Some of the power of the exposition of the end of the film comes from the fact that it's so contemplative and seemingly slow at certain points, but it's that very contemplative quality of the characters who are enigmatic and you're not quite sure where they're going that makes the final explanations or the final directions of the story so powerful.
All right, we do have to stop there. I think the best advice is to build on what Tracy Wufastenberg told you. Start this movie like around 5:30 p.m. Don't try to watch this movie while you're tired, because those moments of stillness and quietness, which can stretch on for quite long periods of time in this movie, it's a 3-hour movie and it kind of feels like 4 at times, and that's not by any means a statement of disrespect. Have lots of energy or an energy drink with you when you watch Drive My Car. And we're back. So fortunate to have the master himself, not from the Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Gene Amatruda is here in the booth to be our technical producer for the day. As usual, the producer of The Nose is Jonathan McPants. So thanks very much to him, and thanks to our panelists who are now going to make some recommendations. James Hanley, why don't you get us going?
Well, I happen to be reading a book by a Jamaican author, or formerly Jamaican author, called The Day I Fell Off My Island by Yvonne Bailey Smith. And she actually is well known in her own right, I think more in the UK perhaps, but she's the mother of Zadie Smith, the writer, and the children's book author, Ben Bailey Smith. And she has another child who is lyricist Luke Skies. And it's a really lovely book about culture, about leaving Jamaica and going to the UK, and an incredible biography, really delightful. And the language in it, which includes patois that is quite well easily understood if you're not familiar with it. The Day I Fell Off My Island by Yvonne Bailey Smith. And one last thing, last night we went to one of our favorite restaurants that I don't think gets mentioned enough, the Shish Kebab House of Afghanistan on the South Road in West Hartford. And what a lovely place that is. The food is great, and the staff who run it, we've been going there to their establishment since they were in the south end of Hartford on Franklin Avenue. Highly recommended.
Yeah, great place. Good recommendations. Tanisha Dugan, why don't you go next?
I will surely go next. It's springtime. And so I am, thinking about the garden. So I'm going to endorse 3 places that I get seeds. One is Botanical Interests. All of these are online. Like many others, I started this obsession during lockdown, and it hasn't escaped me. It's my Jamaican roots, I think. Botanical Interests, that is one. Floret Flowers. They've got just a really cool selection of like odd things if you're into the florals. And Melanated Organics, which is a Black-owned seed company. And they focus on sort of African-American, Caribbean, and African heirloom seeds. So those are 3 places that I've been ordering from these past couple weeks. And I think in the next week or 2, you'll be able to start to get outside, but at the very least, plant indoors.
That's great. Well, great as usual. A great and very unusual recommendation. I love it. So, Tracy Wu Fastenberg, how about you?
I'm going to second Tanisha's there. Just get the garden going, and I'll add Pine Tree Garden Seeds in there, which is a family-owned business up in Maine, and fantastic selection. I am going to endorse Here We Read, which is Here We, WEE, Read. They're on Instagram. And Sharnae Gordon, who runs it, is actually local here in Connecticut, but has a national following. And I'm constantly asked, like, what are some good books for the kids, to sort of introduce diverse characters and everything. She's got it all covered here. She also has a wonderful initiative trying to bring diverse books to all 50 states. So she fundraises and brings them out, to different communities. And it's just a lovely purpose, but also a lovely resource as well.
All right. Well, since you guys are endorsing seeds and gardens, I will endorse something that I've discovered recently called Pushing Daisies, which is a TV show that aired actually from 07 to 09. I never saw it at the time. I was aware that it had kind of an interesting fan base, and it is now discoverable on HBO Max. It is one of several things that we've seen recently. The Good Place by Michael Schur might be one of the possible analogs to it that explores sort of life after death or ways that you kind of play around with the division between life and death for comic purposes. And some of the fun of it also is that it is that rare television show that employs a number of fairly gifted stage actors. Kristen Chenoweth has a major role in this, for which I think she maybe even won an Emmy way back in the day. And there's actually, I just saw an episode which pairs her with Raul Esparza, himself also a kind of a giant of the New York stage, and maybe most notably was one of the people to play Bobby in one of the revivals of Company. So the thing itself is a lot of fun. It has a really interesting background cast, people that you don't get to see that often. Other stage performers like Ellen Greene and Swoosie Kurtz have major roles. Jim Dale is the narrator. So if you kind of like theater and theatrical presentations, the 2 leads are actually people that I don't really know very much. That one of those is a guy named Lee Pace, and the other one is Anna Friel. I really don't know their work very much. But, for people who are looking around for something to watch that's maybe not terribly disturbing, but it's interesting and challenging and funny and does some interesting stuff, this is kind of a nice, safe choice. Oh, and I would throw in that category, I only recently discovered this series. I'm not really the world's biggest Ricky Gervais fan, but my partner started watching Afterlife, which I have to say I sort of joined in for the second season in particular, and really thought was just terrific, about a guy trying to figure out what to do after the death of his wife, and maybe a little bit of kinship with some of the themes that come up in Drive My Car, but not the exalted artistic work that clearly is. All right, thanks very much to our wonderful panel that includes James Handley, Tanisha Dugan, and Tracy Wu Fastenberg. Thanks to the team that puts this show together. We have some really exciting shows coming up next week. If you're listening on Friday, Saturday, I believe we are going to replay at noon my interview with Harvey Fierstein. I really recommend it if you didn't get to hear it yet. And we have a terrific show coming up. I think it's going to be on Tuesday about games.
Across from St. Francis, past the conservatory, up the street from the seminary. You know, it's a very, very, very cool place to hang out. Yeah. It's cozy, like a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, we all be laughing, talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that, and talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh, yeah. Talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah, 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 yeah.